Good evening. Thank you for tuning in to another live. Tonight, I'm going to try to make sure to do a shorter live. These last couple of lives have been extended. So I'm going to try as best as possible to keep this live under an hour and 30 minutes. Basically, what I want to do is I'm going to go over the breaking news, which is, of course, the Department of Justice has intervened and has has filed to become a plaintiff to join the NAACP in a lawsuit for the citizens of or the residents of Jackson, Mississippi in Hinds County regarding HB 1020, which is House Bill 1020. So we're going to go through both of those bills, and we're also going to look at some of the attorneys that are on the new filing. You'll be surprised to see some of the heavy hitters that have basically joined from a law firm, in Washington, D.C. It's called Covington and Burling LLP. It's a really huge, heavy hitters regarding the different attorneys that are on there. So it's great to take a look at that. And then we're going to, of course, open it up so that people can come on the live and share their thoughts or impart their historical point of view. If this is your first time coming in, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. This is not the first, nor will it be the last live that I will do about political issues, not just in Mississippi, but all over the nation. And I want to make sure that you don't miss it. So make sure that you go ahead and hit that button to subscribe. I do have memberships that are available if you would like to support the channel, or at the top, I also have some ways that you can support the channel as well. So let's go ahead and get down to business. I'm going to start off. Let me pull up. I think it's important for us to, first of all, go over basically the original lawsuit and what they are. We'll go through House Bill 1020, and then we'll go through the Senate Bill 2343. So this is from Democracy Docket, and it's just basically going to give you an overview of what the lawsuit is about. So this lawsuit was originally filed by the NAACP, the Mississippi State Conference of the NAACP, and Jackson City branch of the NAACP, and 6 residents of Jackson, Mississippi, against the governor, Tate Reeves, the Attorney General, Lynn Fitch, the Chief Justice of the Mississippi Supreme Court, and other law enforcement officials challenging 2 recently enacted anti-democratic laws. And basically, they target Jackson's majority Black population. One law, House Bill 1020, creates a new court where unelected judges that have jurisdiction over preliminary matters, criminal matters, violations of motor vehicle and traffic laws, and disturbances of the peace within the state's capital complex improvement district. So this is called the CCID. A special district, it's special, in Jackson, centered around the state capitol building with its own police force. So basically, the complaint alleges that unelected judges in the new CCID court, who are appointed by white conservative Chief Justice, would have the authority to set terms of bail and release for Jackson residents. So the law is basically challenging that it violates equal protection under the law because it discriminates against majority Black residents of Jackson. Then we're going to talk about SB 2343. shortly. But basically, that particular law was making it so hard for a person to protest that it violates the First Amendment. Let me see. Hello, everybody. Sorry, I wasn't even looking at that. I was reading. Mr. Carey, Mr. Crumby, Trap Music, Mr. Walker, everybody. Let's wish Mr. Walker a happy early birthday. His birthday is tomorrow. So happy early birthday, Mr. Walker. So we are going to actually get into the actual filing, and we're going to skip some parts, and I'm going to pull out the parts that I think are most important for you to know generally about this particular case. And the reason why we're going to have to skip through and skim read and pick out the most important parts is because the court filing is literally 47 pages long. This is a huge win. We haven't won the whole thing, but it definitely is a huge win for the residents of Jackson, Mississippi. I know a lot of times people may feel like, especially for those residents that you've been down for so long and that nobody hears you. But for this particular, which happened yesterday, this is definitely a huge win. I do want to make sure to acknowledge that there were a lot of people on the ground before the intervening of the Department of Justice, the NAACP. There's a lot of other grassroots civil rights organizations that have some outstanding lawsuits. So I will definitely not forsake them by not mentioning that they were at the forefront before the Department of Justice joined on this particular case. So as you can see, this is the filing, and you can see it says proposed plaintiff intervener, the United States of America. And I'm going to read just the basics of it. And this is basically whenever you file in court, you give like a brief synopsis of what it is that's going on. So the plaintiffs filed the lawsuit on April 21st, challenging the enactment of HB 1020 and Senate Bill 2343. It requires the appointment of 4 new judges to the 7th Circuit Court within 15 days after the passage of the act. So July 1st was the day that all of these things were supposed to take place. And so I'm thinking it says 15 days. So I was thinking that barring the actual lawsuit, that it was supposed to actually go into act like this month. So Section 8 expands the boundaries of the Capitol Complex Improvement District. Section 4 creates a new inferior municipal court with jurisdiction over the new Capitol Complex Improvement District, and allows for the appointment of 2 prosecutors, 2 public defenders, and 1 judge. Among other things, SB 2343 expands the jurisdiction and power of the state-run Capitol Police Force. Number 2, line 2 just basically talks about who the existing plaintiffs are, and that House Bill 1020 and SB 2343 discriminates on the basis of race in violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. The United States seeks to intervene to bring claims against Lynn Fitch in her official capacity as Attorney General of the state of Mississippi, who is an existing defendant in the present lawsuit. The United States also seeks to bring claims against the state of Mississippi. I don't know if any of you have watched Mississippi Burning. It was a really good movie that basically speaks to the climate of racism in Mississippi and how things work. But basically, the reason why Mississippi burning, it reminds me of that, is because the level of intentional racism, it's 2023, and those same types of tactics are being used against Black Americans, especially the citizens of Jackson, Mississippi. And Mississippi, this is not the only thing that's going on. They literally have a federal investigation because of some cops, I want to say in Ridgeland, who kidnapped two Black citizens and shot one of them in the mouth and sexually assaulted them. So, like, this is really bad, the climate right now in Mississippi. And their boldness is also frightening for me because they're so bold and intentional with their racism. So it does say on line 4 that the United States seeks to intervene to challenge certain provisions of House Bill 1020, but the United States does not seek to challenge SB 2343, which will go through Senate Bill 2343 later on. But I will say this, that there are other, this is already a federal lawsuit, and there are other plaintiffs that have filed suit against Senate Bill 2343. I wanted to point out this particular line number 6. And the reason why I wanted to point out line number 6 is because public outrage, political awareness, political and public involvement, and basically hot button items, they are, when something is seen as important to the general public, it pushes the political force, it pushes it into the stratosphere. So basically what I'm saying is public outrage, public opinion, it definitely has an effect on whether or not a court case gets to in front of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is able to pick and choose which cases they hear. If this does go all the way to the Supreme Court, the fact that the Merrick Garland, the Department of Justice, intervened means that there is a better likelihood that this particular case will be heard by the Supreme Court. Oh, okay, it says Rankin County. Thank you. So in Rankin County, which is that North Jackson? I want to say it's North Jackson, but I'm not for sure. I know that they, over time, parts of Jackson, Mississippi became Rankin. They kind of kept chipping away at that line. East Jackson. Okay. Denial of equal protection of the laws on account of race. Yes. So line 6 says, Section 902 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, as amended, grants the United States an unconditional right to intervene in cases seeking relief from the alleged denial of equal protection of law under the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution on account of race, if the Attorney General certifies that the case is of general public importance. Brandon, thank you. So very important that they find this particular case to be of general public importance, and that it's the Department of Justice that is taking this on. That's very important. The United States complaint in intervention alleges that HB 1020 violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment on account of race. The Attorney General has certified that this is a case of general public importance. That certification of public importance is attached here to as Exhibit 1. Okay, so now we're getting ready to go down a little bit. It does say that the NAACP, they don't impose intervention by the United States. And they conferred with counsel for the Jackson Undivided Coalition plaintiffs in the case. So basically, everybody has been conferred with and basically take notice that the United States is intervening. And then it just has the different various civil rights division attorney general. So now what I want to get into is basically the facts of the case, which they talk about in here. And I'm going to also show you a map that basically shows how many judges are in District 7, which that's Jackson's district. And we're going to talk about how many Black judges versus how many white judges there are overall in Mississippi. And once, like I said, this particular memo is literally 47 pages. So while I look for the other, I'm going to be scrolling while we talk about who is on this particular, as far as attorneys, who is on this case. Very important that you look at some of the names that are on here. Of course, Carol Rhodes Esquire, he is a constitutional lawyer, and he's been doing law upwards of 30 to 40 years out of Hazelhurst, Mississippi. I want you to look at Covington and Burlington LLP. These are the attorneys who are also on this case. And once again, another reason why this is so important is because when I read who was on the case, I was like, "Woo, is that a slam dunk? Like, how is it that these heavy hitters are on this case?" Type in the chat if you can see somebody that you know, or if there's a name out there that you recognize on the left-hand side. The first one I see is Eric Holder. That's this guy right here, Eric Holder. He was an attorney general of the United States for 6 years. So not only do we have Merrick Garland on this case, or he's certified, basically saying that the United States of America and the Department of Justice is intervening, but we have Eric Holder on this case. Big time. Very big for the citizens of Jackson, Mississippi to have a lawyer like Eric Holder. And that's not all. He's not the only one that's on there. The next person that is on here is Carol M. Browner. And the reason why Carol M. Browner is a big time lawyer, and this is in DC, like, these are heavy hitter type of lawyers that have basically aligned themselves with this court case. So Carol M. Browner is this lady right here. Once again, she's another lawyer from DC. It's the Covington law firm. So Carroll served as assistant to President Barack Obama and director of the White House Office of Energy and Climate Change Policy, where she oversaw the coordination of environmental, energy, climate, transport, and related policy across the U.S. federal government. So a lot of the lawyers that are signed underneath this lawsuit are heavy-hitting lawyers out of DC. They have a lot of influence. And when I say influence, I don't mean like influence in the sense of malfeasance, or I'm not saying that because they're so influential that the case could tip in their favor. But because you have these types of heavy hitters on this case, it bolsters the probability that it can tip in your favor, because you have these types of people signing their name and their bar number on here to fight for the citizens of Jackson, Mississippi. So I'm excited about that a lot of these attorneys that are heavy hitters are on this particular case. Megan Crowley, she is a litigator who focuses on complex commercial disputes and government-facing litigation. Once again, that's another lawyer. And so a lot of kudos to Carol Rhodes Sr., who is a constitutional lawyer out of Hazelhurst, Mississippi. And like people said in the chat, we need all the help that we could possibly get with regard to who is on this case. So it's exciting to be able to read that and see, oh, okay, so this is not, they're taking this seriously. And a lot of these lawyers, they have experience in constitutional law, federal law. It also heightens the awareness of the issue, serious brain trust. So once again, thank you, Mr. Crumby, for pointing out that public awareness, public outrage creates a realm where the Supreme Court is responsible for picking and choosing which court cases that it wants to hear. But if that court case gets a nod from the Department of Justice, Merrick Garland, and then you have all these heavy hitter lawyers, and then not only that, you're going to see some amicus briefs. And amicus basically means friends of the court. So that means you'll hear, there'll be other law firms or other organizations who have lawyers to write their own briefs. Basically, you may get some that will be for the CCID complex, or basically they'll say that it's okay to appoint judges. But on the other hand, you'll get people from constitutional law. That's all they do, is they basically work on the 14th Amendment and violations of the 14th Amendment. You'll have them writing briefs. And a lot of times there are instances where when the Supreme Court hears the case, they also read those amicus briefs. And in some cases, they can take up some of those briefs that are written, and they can utilize their thoughts to figure out whether or not they're going to affirm or deny whatever the issue is. We're going to strike it down or uphold it. So very important that these different lawyers are on there. I'm excited because for so long, probably since February, it's kind of been up in the air. And they're actually not the only ones that filed it. So I'm going to show you Exhibit 1 just because this is probably one of the most exciting exhibits that was shared on the internet yesterday. Even though this is 47 pages long, this is the certificate of the Attorney General. And it says, I, Merrick B. Garland, Attorney General of the United States, pursuant to 42 U.S.C. 2000 H-2, hereby certify that the case of NAACP versus Reeves, number 323-CV272, SD, Mississippi, is a case of general public importance. And then it's signed by Attorney General of the United States, Merrick B. Garland. Very, very important. So now I'm getting ready to pull up. Let's go ahead and take a look at and Mr. Carey, I will see if I can find the person who was speaking about I guess he was speaking to the state Supreme Court judge regarding that it's never been done before in the Mississippi State's Constitution. The CCID is unconstitutional based off of the fact that they've never done that before. So it seems like, of course, Mississippi doesn't want to adhere to their own precedents with regard to Jackson, Mississippi. They want to change the rules as they go. Mr. Crumby says, another bonus of this brain trust is they also understand how to present and operate under the guise of the Supreme Court. They can also elicit additional funding to balance the playing field. Exactly. So when you have heavy hitters, now, mind you, the NAACP is one entity that was bringing funds. And of course, they have branches all over. So they have a branch in Mississippi. And then basically the corporate office of the NAACP would send additional funding. But like you said, there's a lot of funding that will go into this particular case. And what they're called are special interest groups. So you have, I'm going to give you a couple of like civil rights organizations. And I'm not saying that they particularly are giving money, but what I will say is they would add. So there's the American Civil Liberties Union. There's the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. There's so many different ones, that Southern Poverty Law Center. So there's so many different types of special interest groups that could also not necessarily join the case, but benefit by investing money towards this particular case. So let's go ahead and take a look at this map. So this particular map basically shows all of the districts in Mississippi, except for Circuit Court Districts 18, 21, and 22. And the reason why 18, 21, and 22 are excluded are because they only have one judge each. So there's not really a reason for them to be up there. The districts that you want to look at are Districts 4, District 6, District 7, District 9, and District 11. And if you look in the fourth column, it says percent of judges who are Black. So in district, now the particular case that they're actually going up against, so the one that they're challenging Governor Tate Reeves on, is District 7. But we can look at the other districts as well. So District 4, the district is 73% are Black, as far as constituents, and 50% of the judges are Black. District 6, 53% of the constituents are Black, 50% of the judges are Black. District 9, 51% of the constituents are Black and 50% of the judges are Black. District 11, 71% of the constituents in that area are Black and 33% of the judges, so a third of them, are Black. So we can discuss later about voting, but District 11, whenever the next court seat opens up, or the next election for electing courts, we are definitely going to be needing to heavy hit Circuit Court District 11, because there's no way that 70% of a constituency should only have 33% judges that are Black. So now we're going to focus on number 7, and this is the one that, of course, the Republicans are trying to tip in their balance and favor. 71% of the constituents that live in District 7 are Black, and 100% of the judges who preside over that particular circuit court are Black. And this is the one that they wanted to basically break that up. Mr. Carey says that the president of NAACP, Derek Johnson, graduated from Tougaloo College in North Jackson. Mr. Crumby says ACLU and Southern Poverty Law will add value with additional manpower and strategies covering all bases to protect the team from being outflanked legally. Absolutely. After I just saw some of the names that were on there, I was like, wow, it's going to be, I'm not going to say it's not going to happen, but it is going to definitely be hard for them to be able to outman or outpower the United States of America. I'm going to drop the StreamYard, so if anybody wants to come up and provide any additional comments, and we're getting ready to move on to SB 2343. But I did want to basically read the complaint, because I really think that it sets the tone and puts into perspective, like, oh, okay, so this is why. And it's straightforward to where anybody can understand the facts of the case. So for decades, the Mississippi legislature has shortchanged Hinds County criminal justice system. So, of course, the Mississippi said, well, you know, they have all these backlogged cases and they're not effectively dealing with the crime, but you shortchanged for decades. This isn't just something that happened overnight. You've shortchanged just Jackson, Mississippi as a whole, not just the criminal system or the civil system. We're talking about environmentally. So we already have the Environmental Protection Agency that had to come over and take over because you've been shortchanging infrastructure and our water system. Now we have the Department of Justice already coming down here as well. So this is the thing when I was saying, like, These folks know what's up. They know what's going on. And it's great to see that they are taking a step towards tipping the balance in Mississippi. I think this is a time for not only just Jackson, Mississippi, but Mississippians. If you got stuff that's going on while you have the camera and the shining a light on it, this is the time where any and everything that they're doing wrong needs to be put out on the table so that it can be rectified. So let me finish reading this. For decades, the Mississippi legislature has shortchanged Hinds County criminal justice system. The legislature has failed to provide the county with the resources, funding, and personnel that it needs. This has strained the system and made it harder for local police, prosecutors, judges, and other officials to do their work effectively and efficiently. Instead of addressing the situation by providing needed support for prosecutors and judges and police managed by Black officials, the state has compounded the problem. It has singled out Hinds County as the only place in Mississippi whose residents are subject to anew special judges and prosecutors appointed by white state officers, whom, because of racially polarized voting, they cannot hold democratically accountable. So for anybody who ever makes the assertion that Black people don't vote, and if you guys would just get out and vote, maybe you could make a change. Well, nothing's happening because you're not getting out and voting. Like, to this day, I cannot stand when people make these sweeping allegations and assertions. Well, it's your local elections that matter. In every single Democratic stronghold where there is a large Black population, those particular districts are blue. They are Democratic. That still does not have the power at the state level to overcome all the Republicans. And what do? Every time somebody introduces something, they dead it in committee. Every single time. In this action, the United States challenges portions of Mississippi House Bill 1020 that denied to the Black residents of Hinds County the rights of self-government and local control over local institutions enjoyed by all other Mississippians. HB 1020 intentionally discriminates against minority voters in Hinds County by creating a system of judicial and prosecutorial appointments specifically designed to undermine the historical power of Black residents through their elected officials to self-govern. Hinds County population is 70% Black. While Mississippi has not elected a single Black statewide official since Reconstruction, Black residents of Jackson and Hinds County elect their preferred candidates to many local government bodies. All 4 elected judges sitting on the court of the 7th Circuit Court District are Black, as is the elected district attorney. The mayor of Jackson and majority of the Jackson City Council are also Black. HB 1020 undermines the power of Hinds County's Black electorate. The bill creates a new novel court system for part of Jackson called the CCID, Inferior Court CCID Court. It presides over a special district that was originally created to fund and administer infrastructure projects for state buildings like the state capitol and its surrounding. The new court has a state-appointed judge and state-appointed prosecutors. The state-operated Capitol Police directs cases to the court. HB 1020 doubles the size of the CCID by annexing neighborhoods with heavily white population. These changes make the CCID a plurality white enclave within Jackson, which has a 79.5% Black population. This ensures that the appointed CCID judge will have jurisdiction over crimes committed in many more of Jackson's predominantly white upscale neighborhoods and allow the Capitol Police to funnel cases to CCID prosecutors and judges instead of the district attorney and the municipal courts. The CCID court is the only specially created court system of its kind in Mississippi. It insulates residents within the boundaries from judges accountable to the Black voters of Jackson and Hinds County. HB 1020 also mandates the appointment of 4 new special circuit judges to the Hinds County Circuit Court. So this next line just basically talks about the Mississippi State Constitution. This is what Mr. Carey was talking about when he asked about whether or not it's a violation of the Mississippi Constitution, in which it is. In Mississippi, under the state constitution, citizens have the right to elect judges to circuit courts. The Hinds County Circuit Court was created in its current form with 4 permanent elected judges in 1994. While the number of permanent elected judges on that court has not changed since, many other circuit court districts in Mississippi have gained at least 1 elected judge. The number of elected circuit judges statewide has grown by nearly 20%. Although Hinds County's shares of the overall pool of elected circuit court judges relative to the rest of the state has decreased, publicly available data suggests that the court's share of the caseload relative to the rest of the state has increased. Evidence is present here of the relevant indicators of intentional discrimination set forth by the U.S. Supreme Court in Village of Arlington Heights v. Metropolitan Housing Development Corporation. With respect to the sequence of events, HB 1020's legislative history, as well as the context in which it was passed following the election of an all-Black bench to the Hinds County Circuit Court for the first time in 2018, and appointments of mostly white circuit court judges in 2020 and 2022, indicates that the legislature adopted HB 1020's appointment provisions for the purpose of transferring control of portions of Jackson and Hinds County criminal, legal, and judicial system to statewide actors more accountable to white voters and shifting away authority from local officials elected by Black voters, rather than bolstering support for existing court systems, judges, or prosecutors accountable to the people of Jackson and Hinds County. So they could find the funding basically for this inferior court, CCID, but for some reason they couldn't just properly fund Hinds County and the circuit court. The Mississippi legislature passed HB 1020 in wake of other efforts to place control over local institutions in the hands of statewide officials and to deny Hinds County or attach strings to critical resources. For example, in recent years, the Mississippi legislature has tried to strip Jackson of local control over its municipal airport, conditioned disbursement of federal funds to Jackson on oversight by state officials, and denied the funding needed to address Jackson's ongoing water crisis. I think I need to repeat this particular sentence because it's so important that it's in black and white, the type of treatment and what's been going on in Jackson, Mississippi. So it's amazing that to see this in black and white and know that this is from the United States of America and the basically Department of Justice. So we're going to reread that because they know the historical significance and they actually do know what's been going on. It says, in recent years, the Mississippi legislature has tried to strip Jackson of local control over its municipal airport, condition disbursement of federal funds to Jackson on oversight by state officials. And what they could possibly be talking about is not only they were just trying to put in a whole bunch of red tape for the water crisis and all that money. and denied the funding needed to address Jackson's ongoing water crisis. I'm not saying that Jackson State needs to be trying to file a conjoining lawsuit on the Mississippi legislator continuously denying bonds money for us to get our own water system. But I'm just saying it's in black and white that we've denied the funding needed to address Jackson's ongoing water crisis. That does include Jackson State University. It absolutely includes Jackson State University because we have had it introduced, I would say at least 3 to 4 times, the bonds for Jackson State University. Other people might say, oh, let's just focus on this. But for me, I would be trying to tag right on along up in here and trying to get a piece of the pie, which is the Mississippi legislature denied the funding needed to address Jackson's ongoing water crisis. The Mississippi legislature has denied bonds needed for Jackson State to get our own water system. Further, the governor has repeatedly used his line item veto power. Oh, this is so important. So important. The governor has repeatedly used his line item veto power to cut funding appropriations to Jackson institutions while leaving appropriations for other cities almost entirely untouched. I just had to sit here in silence for like 2 seconds because what? What? The governor has repeatedly used line item veto power to cut funding appropriations to Jackson institutions. And when I think of institutions, I definitely think of the Jackson State University. While appropriations for other cities are almost entirely untouched. When I tell you that we need, which I apologize, I really do. I did not go to law school right out of college. I wasn't thinking about law school. Like, we need a lawsuit for Jackson State University. I mean, it kind of starts with Jackson State, but in all reality, at this point, if they stepped on your shoe, you need to be trying to sue right now the wrong way. If they stepped on your shoe the wrong way, you need to be filing a lawsuit in the city, and not a frivolous lawsuit, but basically what I'm saying is Jackson State University is the institution, and I would say that whatever they need to get someone out there to do, which, you know what, I'm not going to say what they need to do because Jackson State probably has already done it, which is they've already had an independent assessment of how much it would take for the water system, which is one of the things that they've continually denied. Roads and infrastructure, which they've already continued to deny, but they would need like an outside assessment, someone to assess the damages of foregoing money, like if money hasn't been coming in like it's supposed to. So they would need to know how much it is that has caused damage. So let's say, for instance, deferred maintenance and infrastructure and continuously denying Jackson State that money cost us $50 million. We need a $50 million lawsuit. And you basically could utilize the same type of verbiage here, which is the governor has repeatedly used his line item veto power to cut funding for appropriations to Jackson State University, since y'all are saying Jackson institutions. Mississippi legislature has tried to strip Jackson State University. The Mississippi legislature has refused to do upgrades to the Jackson State University. Like, this is, when I tell you that this particular lawsuit is so big, and it's not even just about HB 1020, like, we need to be filing lawsuits for, I haven't done any research about the hospital. I think that maybe the Jackson hospital might be the only hospital in Mississippi that's getting proper funding for some things, because they don't even have any. All the other hospitals are closing. But the reason why it's important for Jackson State to get into this little lawsuit, or to form their own lawsuit, federal lawsuit, is because then once you open up Jackson State, you also open up Alcorn State and Mississippi Valley. It's almost like the Ayers case 2.0. Almost like Ayers case 2.0. Basically, and for me, this is what I would try. I would try to do it, because there is so much, their eyes are on the legislature now, and there's so much like heat on them. If I was Mississippi Valley, if I was Alcorn State, if I was Jackson State, I would be introducing like 5 to 10 different things that need to be fixed, or I would be filing the lawsuit. And when legislature, or when it opens back up, I would be once again trying to introduce bonds for infrastructure, bonds for our own water system. Now is the time, and more important than ever, that we go ahead and put pressure on them. Because if they deny it, that bolsters your claim, right? They're still denying it. And a couple of shows ago, I think it was basically when we were talking about affirmative action, one of the things that I talked about was the HBCU Capital Finance Program. And I spoke with the director, and he said, well, Mississippi schools are not eligible for any type of federal bonds, because Mississippi has their own bond program. So why would they allow HBCUs to get bond money from the feds when they already have that program? And I was like, oh, okay. So Mississippi has bonds for these types of projects, but they keep purposely and intentionally denying the HBCUs the bonds to do these types of things. Now more than ever, it's so important for Jackson State it's so important. The legislative process for HB 1020 was unusual and departed from normal procedures. So they actually noticed the differences. Bill sponsors refuse to consult. Now, you just going to intentionally be racist. You just can't help yourself. You already racist, but now you're going to be so blatant that a 5-year-old child could see the difference. Bill sponsors refuse to consult Black Hinds County legislators before introducing HB 1020. The sponsors then sought to avoid and ignore the input of Black legislators during the legislative process. They steered the bill out of the normal legislative channels to a specific committee to reduce scrutiny by Black Hinds County legislators and members of the public. They rejected multiple amendments that would have respected the democratic preferences of the Black electorate of Hinds County, refusing to create elected judgeships, require judge to reside in Hinds County, or otherwise to circumscribe the broad appointment powers conferred by HB 1020. Ouch. When they say, how many of y'all have seen Mississippi Burning? Oh, reminiscent. Hey Doc, how you doing? JSU can actually have a law school and possibly a medical school if they would pay up. Mr. Carey, drop what page that is on. All right, let's see. Okay, I see it. Proponents of HB 1020 also made racially tinged statements in support of the bill, treating Hinds County and Jackson as if they were incapable of effective self-governance, stating that Jackson belongs to all of Mississippi, not only to the people who live, work, and pay taxes there, and suggest that state leaders may look outside Hinds County to find the best and the brightest judges and other leaders. Oh, Lord. These folks are delusional. It's the audacity for me. Proponents of HB 1020 argue that the new appointed officials, both in the CCID courts and Hinds County Circuit Court, are needed to address high crime rates. However, proponents do not explain why crime rates could not be addressed by creating newly elected offices rather than singling out Hinds County residents by imposing a surfeit of largely unaccountable state-appointed officials. The Mississippi legislature enacted HB 1020 not only being aware of its discriminatory effect, so basically they knew what they were doing, that the bill's appointment provisions independently and collectively will undermine the agency of Black residents in Hinds County in deciding how their criminal justice system is run, will effectively revoke control over critical portions of that system from current Black local officials in Jackson and Hinds County, and will carve out a special enclave within Jackson to insulate predominantly white neighborhoods from judges and prosecutors elected by Black voters, but also desiring that effect. So it's almost like when white folks do gentrification, they come into a Black neighborhood that hasn't received any type of state or local dollars. And then all of a sudden you see corporations and white people move into these neighborhoods. And then all of a sudden magically funding appears. They got new paved roads. They have new businesses opening. So Jackson is not one of those cities where you're just getting rid of 79% or 79.5% of the Black residents. You're not. And Mr. Carey is correct. The law, the Mississippi State Constitution says that they're supposed to be elected. So this is how art meets reality. Art meets reality. In 2023, we have these types of legislatures in America passing these types of laws. What you want to bet that whoever these judges are that were just magically appointed by the state, that a attorney could bring forth a lawsuit that Jackson needs to take, or, Jackson needs to surrender their airport. Then all of a sudden you have a situation where the airport gets taken over. So it's bigger than just about the criminal and civil process. These folks are trying to bully their way into Jackson to take over. They can't figure out a way to get the Jackson residents out, the Black residents. They can't figure out a way. And now it's come to a head to the point where they just said they're going to bully their way. The Equal Protection Clause prohibits singling out Black residents of Hyde County for second-class treatment and favoring white residents for special treatment. Because the appointment provisions of HB 1020 were created by the state to intentionally discriminate based on race, they violate the 14th Amendment. I think that right there was probably one of the best overviews of this particular lawsuit. It just puts everything into perspective. Highlights the blatant racism, highlights everything with regard to how it's been decades. It's not just, it's a culmination of things that has brought this to a head. Outside of putting us in chains or burning crosses in front of our lawns, this is the highest order of systemic racism that you can visually see with your own eyes. I'm going to also read some of these factual allegations. According to the 2020 census, the state of Mississippi has a total population of 2,961,279. Of those residents, this is the state of Mississippi? Okay. Of those residents, 1,104,233, roughly 37.3%, identified as non-Hispanic Black. And so basically 55.4% identified as non-Hispanic White, and then 37.3% identified as non-Hispanic Black. According to the 2020 census, Hinds County has a total population of 227,742, of whom 159,390, which is 70%, identified as basically Black. That's Hinds County. Now, line 24 is talking about the city of Jackson. So basically what that's saying is in Hinds County, 70% identify as Black, but in the city of Jackson, 122,131 people, which is 79.5%, are Black. So 70% of the residents in Hinds County identify as Black, but in Jackson, the city, of Jackson, 79.5% identify as Black. There's only 25,424 white people in the city of Jackson, and they wanted to create special courts, special judges, all this special stuff specifically for white people. Mr. Haynes says only 40% vote. Well, let's do a little math for you. Because Mr. Haynes says only 40% vote. Okay, so let's do the city of Jackson. So if 40% of 153,701 people vote, that's 61,000 people. I don't think you understand what that means. If 61,000 people in the city of Jackson vote, which is 40% of the Black population, it's more than all the white people in the city. And that's why they're so mad. So Mr. Haynes, while only 40% of the Jackson residents vote, 40% of those voting, if they all vote, even if they didn't, even if only of that 40%, if only 80% voted Democratic, it still is a Democratic stronghold. And so that's why they had gerrymandering. And when gerrymandering didn't work, that's why they try to do this, where they create a subcategory for only 16% of, or 16.5% of the population in Jackson. They're trying to create a whole court system. So basically what I'm saying is that could the voting be higher? Absolutely. But 40% of the residents that are voting, like as long as they vote at 40%, and most of them are voting Democratic, which I think they probably are, it's still too many. And excuse me, I think I got that number wrong. So I supposed to take 40% of 122,131. So I'm supposed to take 40% of that, which is 48,852 votes. Which, how many of those white people are voting? That would say that 100% of all the white people are voting. That even if 100% of the white people vote, which is 25,424, it would have to be, in order for them to even get remotely close, it would have to be like even 30% of that voting is 36,639. So basically what I'm saying is it would have to be almost a no turnout in order for any type of Republican to win in those types in Jackson. It would have to be virtually no turnout. Like it have to be almost 20% or less than 30% would have to vote for it to even be remotely close. The city of Jackson has one of the highest proportions of Black residents of any large city in the United States. The city of Jackson has one of the highest proportions of Black residents of any large city in the United States. Why is that so important? So the war on Black residents in Mississippi, although it's like intentionally racist, and they're intentionally trying to figure out ways to disenfranchise Black voters, to bring us back to the 40s and 50s. It's almost like a test run or a test case. On both sides of the aisle, it's a test case, because basically what you're saying is, can I change the system to stack it against them. I'm already have environmental racism. I've already, for decades, not provided enough funding. I've already messed up their water system in hopes that they'll leave. What more can we do to get rid of these Black folks? What more can we do? And they just, you know what? They got a little bit too, they've been doing it, but at this point, it was so blatant that it could not be ignored. This next piece is going to go over the historical discrimination of Mississippi. The fact that this is in the newly filed complaint, it's reassuring because it basically validates what every citizen, what every student that's at Jackson State University, faculty, staff, families of students, family members, residents of Jackson. It's what we've always known. Even if you were born in Jackson and you left, or you went to Jackson State University, them outlining and putting it in black and white, it validates the pain that the residents of Mississippi has gone through, not just with the water. We're talking about with voting, discrimination, police brutality. All of it is validated through this particular complaint. Mississippi has a long history of discrimination against Black residents of Jackson and Hinds County. Based on its history of racial discrimination, Mississippi was designated as subject to the preclearance requirement of Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act when it was enacted in 1965. Under Section 5, covered jurisdictions were required to obtain preclearance from the United States Attorney General or from a 3-judge court of the United States District Court for the District of Columbia prior to implementing any voting change. So let's go over that. We all know about the disenfranchisement that Mississippi did regarding voting. And a lot of people keep on saying, well, Jackson, Mississippi only has a 40% voting population. And we have to also think about historically what Mississippi has done. And then you have to think about the elderly and people who they've been through the civil rights era. They've been through polling taxes. You might even have some grandmas or great grandmas that are still alive that was told, if you can't read, you can't vote. If you can't pay this polling tax, you can't vote. Or them saying, oh, you didn't vote in the last election, so we're allowed to purge you now for this election. So that's what type of tactics they're doing. Or, oh, you're not registered at this poll, so you can't vote here. And then it's like, okay, so where do I vote? Oh, I don't know. You're going to have to call this number to figure out where you vote. So let's not act like some of those percentages are low because people just don't want to vote. The amount of disenfranchisement that has happened historically and today, I'll tell you what, when I was on Jackson State campus, I definitely didn't have no problem voting because I made sure they had voting drives and stuff like that. But even there were some students who weren't able to vote. So it's let's not take and put down the residents and say, well, only 40% of y'all are voting. It doesn't matter. 40% of the residents of Jackson, Mississippi is 100% they're going to win whatever it is. If 40% of the Black residents are the ones that are voting, there is 100% chance that all of the people that are running in elections, if they're Democrats, it's 100% chance that they're going to win. That's how many residents there are. Like, there's no way for them to tip that. So that's why they came up with this idea to appoint judges rather than have them to be elected. Mississippi, Jackson, and Hinds County remain subject to Section 5 until the Supreme Court decision in Shelby County versus Holder in 2013. So there was a Supreme Court decision made in 2013 that basically said Mississippi, Jackson, and Hinds County are no longer required to get a preclearance before implementing any voting changes. To obtain Section 5 preclearance, covered jurisdictions were required to demonstrate that voting changes neither have the purpose nor would have the effect of denying or abridging the right to vote on account of race, color, or membership in a language minority group. So I would think that just based off of this verbiage, that the United States, or excuse me, the Attorney General and the Department of Justice might try to even challenge the Shelby County v. Holder decision. Like, I think that the way that I'm reading this verbiage, when it keeps on talking about this preclearance, it's looking like they're trying to re-implement the preclearance, which means that it would also be viable probably for other states. It could possibly happen in Georgia, Tennessee, like, just based off of them talking about the preclearance, they may be trying to get this reenacted. While the state of Mississippi and its political subdivisions were subject to the requirements of Section 5, the United States Attorney General interposed objections under Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act to about 170 submissions of their voting changes. So that means that while they had that preclearance going on, 170 of their voting changes that they submitted for this preclearance were denied. Because that means that whatever those voting changes were, abridged the right to vote, and it was based on race, color, or membership in a language minority group. So this is pre-2013. They're just going over the historical evidence of what Mississippi has done. 5 of those Section 5 objections halted attempts by the state of Mississippi and 4 of its political subdivisions to change local elective offices to appointed offices. They include a state law that would have changed the office of County Superintendent of Education from elective to an appointed position in several counties, as well as local efforts to convert school trustee, city clerk, and superintendent of education positions from elected to appointed. So basically, they were trying to control everything. They don't want you to be able to vote in anything. They want to be able to control who they appoint. Sounds similar to IHL in this president search. The Attorney General interposed 4 Section 5 objections to voting changes proposed by Hinds County and its political subdivisions, all of which involve the redrawing of political boundaries in ways that would have been retrogressive to minority voters. These objections included 2 Hinds County redistricting plans, an attempt by the then all-white city council for the city of Jackson to undertake a large annexation of majority white areas into Jackson that would have significantly offset Black population growth, as well as redistricting plan by the city of Clinton. So, basically, I'm going to go to this. If you guys can see, District 7 and how it has 71% of the constituents who are Black, they were going to try to merge or chunk in to lower that percentage of constituents who are Black. So they were probably trying to bring in 20 to 30% more white constituents. And by doing that, you lower the impact of having that many Black voters, and being that would be a problem. So right now, 40% of Black folks voting, you're still going to get the ability to push through all of your Democratic candidates. If they annexed, or if they would have been successful at annexing Clinton, or successful at bringing in more white constituents, then that means that 40%, it needs to be raised to 60 or 70%. So that's dangerous. Prior to a successful lawsuit under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, Hinds County Circuit Court judges, like those in other counties, were elected under a multi-member at-large system using numbered posts. In 1987, a federal court held that the use of that system for electing Hinds County Circuit Court judges violated Section 2 because it provided Black residents less opportunity to participate in the political process. The district court's ruling in that case observed that Mississippi's history of discrimination has extended to the bar and consequently to the judiciary. The court also held that the 7th Circuit Court District, which included Hinds and Yazoo counties at that time, had an overall white majority population, that Black voters are politically cohesive in the district, and that white voters vote sufficiently as a bloc to enable them usually to defeat Black candidates who oppose white candidates. As a result of Martin, Hinds County Circuit Court judges are elected from single-member subdistricts. The Martin Court also found that at-large judicial elections in other local courts, the Hinds County Court and the 5th Chancery Court District, which was coterminous with Hinds County, violated Section 2. Those courts were also ordered to hold elections in subdistricts. So you see, this isn't something that just happened overnight. They've been doing it for decades. I wasn't even born in I just was born in 1987. So that means that this isn't something that's new. Mr. Haynes, why do you keep saying only if we vote? Only if we vote where? All of the elected officials in Jackson, Mississippi, I think there's maybe a couple of white elected officials on the city council are Black and are Democratic. So what is he talking about? Only if we vote. I hope that's just in jest, because it has nothing to do with voting. I'm literally breaking down to you the systematic way that they stack the cards against Black Americans, and you're in here saying only if we vote. I've literally laid it out from A to Z how they basically have disenfranchised Black voters, and you're saying only if we vote. Voting remains racially polarized in Mississippi, in Hinds County, and in Jackson. Black Jacksonians have a long history of voting as a bloc for candidates in local and statewide elections, most of whom are Black. And I mean, that's just the gist of it. If you're a Black candidate, and you are in a Black majority district, 9 times out of 10, you'll be able to get elected. The first Black city representative in Jackson were elected after the governing body changed from a 3-person commission to a 7-member mayor-council form of government in 1985. Mind you, the 7-member mayor-council, that's the one that's been having so many problems recently, because the council and the mayor were basically at odds with the trash pickup. That was definitely disgusting to see Black council members at war with the mayor for the trash, and they didn't end up doing anything but basically signing the contract that was already, the people who were already doing the trash are the ones that they had to go with anyway. So it was a debacle. And I'm hoping and praying that the city council members don't try the foolishness right now. Like, this is not what we need. We need solvency, and it needs to be a unified front. It doesn't matter if you do or you don't like who is the mayor at this point in time. You need to be on a collective front here, because this isn't about what power you're trying to gain. This is about the state of your citizens. The first Black mayor of Jackson was elected in 1997. Today, Jackson's mayor, a majority of its city council, the interim chief of police appointed by the mayor, and Hinds County district attorney and sheriff are Black. Do you hear that, Mr. Haynes? The mayor, the interim chief of police, the majority of the city council, the Hinds County district attorney, and the sheriff are all Black. In recent decades, as residents began electing predominantly Black officials, white Mississippi elected officials have expressed a lack of trust in Jackson, Hinds County, and their Black elected officials. State officials have made public statements criticizing local Black leadership. State officials have also been accused of failing to adequately invest in the city of Jackson. So this, and I think for the majority of local residents, they don't necessarily know what's going on behind the scenes. All they know is my trash isn't getting picked up. Oh, hey, Mr. Walker, how you doing?
Hey. Yeah, I've been listening to you, and first off, it's all by design. Let's just be clear. That's why they're heavy in patrolling our neighborhoods, because what that does is multiple tickets, because most of the time people don't pay their tickets. They have bench warrants. Then you have the crime element, and those eventually create felonies, which felonies diminishes your right to vote. So it's all by design. I mean, even going back to that piece of, well, I'm gonna say POS, Ronald Mason. He was a thrift grabber until if Jackson State didn't have such a wonderful political science department that actually put it out there of the emails that he was sending Hank Bounds back in the day when they was trying to get the University of Mississippi at Jackson. And I'm glad that we ran that piece of, POS off. So going up to date, basically what happens is the shot callers, they're all in one sector. You have Northeast Jackson, you have Meadowbrook, you have Eastover, you have Bellhaven, Fondren, and then you also have certain parts of downtown. If you notice, um, the streets get worse when you're flowing into quote unquote all black neighborhood. Also, if you notice, pay attention, they've never fixed the street over there by West Street. Why? Because, and going Woodrow Wilson, Medgar Evers, it's because Jackson State Stadium is right there. And they're still upset about that because, you know, Jackson State has basically taken ownership, if you will, of the vet.
Right.
Also, if you notice, everywhere that there's let's just say I'm gonna use a bubble. I'll use the term a bubble of where whites can be.
Right.
There's either pavement going on, or either there's some little, as we Jacksonians say, that's a little pathway for them to keep their stuff. Also, they know that HUD has now that started in the 90s, you know, the Reaganomic BS, all that crap. They know that HUD's comes in everywhere, but now we as a people, well, we have to realize that that same 40% that you were talking about, and I appreciate you saying that, but we have to really, really watch behind the scenes of that, is because it leads to the patrolling to go to as a gateway towards felonies. So what we need to do is get on those 18-year-olds, and hear me out on this. Start hitting those 18, 19 years olds that are fresh out of high school that has to go through what's called selective service. And we need to begin running campaigns for that, because, and then let them know and let them see how their vote will matter.
Right.
Because the senior citizens aren't going anywhere. You know, you have the Ashley Acres, you have the White Rock, the Northwest Hills, the Westchester Hills, the Presidential Hills, the Queens, the Brown Bottoms, the Vernon Addition, you know, old school popular neighborhoods like that. That still have, you know, 70, 80-year-old people there that still, and you know, let's just, you know, 50% of those people are homeowners, you know, because houses back then, you know, you're looking at anywhere between the $35,000 to maybe the $80,000 range back then. You know, and starting by design, because we had several plants in Jackson where people made money. You had Frito-Lay. You had, well, they turned it to GMC. You had that plant there. You had, you had Siemens. You had several places where black people, even without a college degree or just a high school or GED, they were actually used to making $25, $30 an hour. You had the what's called the GNO. You had that plant there. You
remember Uncle said this not. You remember when we with Jackson? Well, I know it was like a little bit out before you got to Clinton, but when they had MCI WorldCom, that building right off of 20.
They sure did. They had MCI WorldCom. That was a huge money maker there too. Of course, Ernie Evers took us under. I mean, there was several prosperous places that you can work in Jackson that people, like I said, even with a high school diploma, was making $25 an hour, even in the 70s, when gas was only 49 cents, 59, 69 cents. So I said that to say this: a lot of that stuff was sucked out, and it's all by design. that they took a lot of this stuff away. You know, you had, you know, the pundits, if you will, and you had the puppets that were elected into mayoralship, and they just went along with the plan.
Hey,
You know,
Right.
go ahead.
oh
Promise,
no,
promise a little bit of power in exchange for compliance with whatever agenda that they were running.
yeah.
Hey Doc,
Tom,
how you doing?
I'm good, Timon. Hey, pull up that highlight what Russell Haynes just said. He's like, is you think more black people in Mississippi State than white? Why is a GOP governor? Might be wrong, yes or no. My thing about that is, if you have to understand Mississippi politics is so much different than anybody else's politics in the United States, because
Correct.
Mississippi politics damn near is, it's like they kind of follow a little bit on what the United States like as a whole does, and you can win you can win popular vote in the state of Mississippi, but you have individuals as far as with those counties that basically elects the governor. And so if your county is not let's just put 70% black, i.e. Hinds County, i.e. you go to the Delta, you're not gonna win. You're not gonna win. The last Democratic governor that Mississippi had was Kirk Fordyce. That's the last one. And when he was the governor, it was still coming some of the same issues that's going on now, what was going on then. But and when he was governor, the Republicans try to dilute his power or what he can do. Now, where you see now, where you had the last couple of Haley Barbour, you got Phil Bryant now with Tate Reeves. They have tried to give those governors more to try to usurp the black mass, and just try to force them out. I don't know if you're gonna try to force out over a million black residents in the state of Mississippi.
Well, there's no way to do it.
You
There's no
can't
way
do
to
it.
you're not going to be able to do that. But I think the biggest, from the grand scheme of things, is what they're trying to do is take, have the state, have Jackson state control, meaning that everything has to go to the state, and 10 times out of 10, based upon history, even before and after Reconstruction, there's always been white leadership in the grand scheme of things of Mississippi as a whole. So, like I said, what we would have to do, because even in the other sub districts, that still have two white city councilmen, it's a heavy populated, where blacks are staying there, that they can, like Timona said, and like you're saying, that you can win that vote. But the key to it is that if we can get someone in on the state level, because see, of course, Congressman Benny Thompson, the Delta, he does things for the Delta, but that's just only one area. And if you think about that area, although I love my people from the area, from the Delta, I love people all over Mississippi, but let's just be honest. I mean, is that really going to make just this grand factor? But what comes down to it is people in Jackson and the surrounding areas of Jackson can make the change. But go ahead.
Oh no, but it's basically saying, like, you give more power to the governor, and then you try to strip the power away from the mayor of the city of Jackson, because you felt, it's basically I'm gonna be honest. If we're gonna be honest with you, basically telling Mayor Lumumba, nigga, you better get in line. That's what they really saying.
Right.
Well,
And
yeah,
then
I mean, well,
I just wanted to
actually,
point
he said
out, because people keep on saying this, and it's not possible. There's no such thing as, people will say anything's possible. One thing that's not possible is Black people being able to flip the statewide elections. And the reason for that is because the white people who represent 58% of Mississippi are going to, you might get, and that's kind of pushing it, I would say 5 to maybe 7 or 8% that will vote Democratic. It's very low. It's very, very low. The amount of white people that would vote Democratic is very, very low.
My uncle, Michael Smith is a Democratic out of Lincoln County, Brookhaven.
Lincoln County.
Yeah, that's my
smart,
uncle.
Smart. Oh man, he's a smart guy. Smart guy. Very.
Yeah.
Hell, he's overqualified for that. He's overqualified, actually.
Yeah, my uncle is a retired firefighter. He stay out in Boca Chica. I think you probably know who my uncle. You know who my uncle is.
I know him very well.
Yeah, that's my uncle. That's my uncle Mike. He lost his. Yeah, he had lost his leg. I forgot it was in an accident, but he went on to try to. He was trying to run. I guess he was trying to go up against Cindy Hyde. What's that lady name? Cindy Hyde Smith, whatever her name is. Cindy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Honestly, your uncle was the one that exposed the actual information when she had given. She was doing a campaign, and she had pointed at Russ College. But she was over there at Ole Miss, which, being very familiar, you got to understand that, Oxford and Holly Springs, it's probably like maybe a 20-minute commute, if that. And she had pointed and said, it's those people over there, which she was pointing towards, the roads that leads towards Russ College. And then she stated the upstanding people, less the athletes. These were her exact words. She said the upstanding people, less the athletes over here. And it was your uncle that actually exposed that. And see, being that Mississippi is still a keep 'em flying state. And let me explain what I'm saying about that. Years ago, it wasn't too long ago, actually. There was a vote on whether to change the Mississippi state flag.
Right.
That was the biggest study, and the numbers also shows that was the biggest voting turnout of the 20th century in Mississippi. Period. That was the biggest turnout. That one election right there.
It was a special election, right?
It was a special election. It was a SEP. It was called a SEP, special election. Yeah, that was the biggest, the largest voting turnout of the 20th century in Mississippi over something that was so racist, so beneath us, and so dumb. So now let's go back. Now let's also go back in history. One reason why Jackson State University is so near and dear. See, there was a time that Jackson, Mississippi, as far as census, was actually on the same, as far as a population standpoint, it actually had more than Birmingham, Alabama. It had more than Mobile. It was on the level of probably maybe 150,000 to 200,000 less than Louisville, Kentucky. At one point in time, Jackson proper, that's why they called it a metro area. That's where it came from. It had, 500,000 to 600,000 people. Now we got to go back and also Madison, Ridgeland, all that stuff was woods.
Mm-hmm.
Because North Park, that's the only thing they had. And North Park, when you left right outside of North Park going by Pale Orchard, once you left Pale Orchard, Old County Road used to be Old County Line Road. That was just woods back there.
Right, because the North Part section was like one of the most, I want to say, I think it wasn't the wealthiest, but it was a little bit more of the affluent neighborhood besides besides Bellhaven.
Bellhaven, Meadowbrook. You had Bellhaven, Meadowbrook. All that was Northeast Jackson. Then you had the ultimate one, which is still the ultimate one as far as Jackson. It's called Eastover. That's where, the guy, when they have East Ford, right there on Highway 80, Harold East used to stay there. You had Mike Moore. You had people like that stayed over there. You had Harold McCray, which owned the original McCrays, which started in Meadowbrook, which ventured out and he sold it to Belk. So I said that to say this, the best tactic that we can use at this point now is basically run the numbers, hit these high schools.
Mm-hmm.
So when these kids, before they get out here in the world and get in trouble, because it's by design,
Mm-hmm.
we get in their minds that their vote counts.
Right.
And the biggest thing is because Jackson State is in an area where the vote counts as well.
Right.
And we have to understand Jackson State from a historical front, that's where the black people of Jackson, Mississippi, were going to get a college degree from.
Right.
That's where they were going. They were going straight to Jackson State. Now, would they go to Utica? Well, they call it Utica. Utica Junior College. They'll go there. Some will go there. Some maybe go to Alcorn. But primarily, they would go to Jackson State University as far as education. And I just thought about that old place. It used to be called Packard. And for all those old school Jacksonians, they changed it to GMC, but Packard was actually a direct distributor for GMC coming outside of Detroit. So a lot of people, used to work there that, like I said, in the 70s was making $25, $27 an hour. It used to be called Packard. And so, I said that to say this. I do agree with Ron. Voting is important, but right now it's the right vote to go after.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to clarify for people who keep saying voting matters. In all of the districts in which have heavily populated Black people, that's where the reason why you'll see a small base of House of Representatives at the state level is because they are representing those pockets of majority Black communities. They do elect their Black officials. It's not like they're not voting in Black officials. Just at the state level, it's a super majority with Republicans because Republicans do represent 58% of the population in Mississippi. And so they are going to hold the most amount of representatives. So when people say, oh, you guys just need to get out the vote, that's not what this is about. It's not about them not voting. Could they increase their voting? Absolutely. But as I pointed out before, 40% of African-American vote in any election in Jackson currently would still beat out 100% of the white vote, which is why they are trying to implement all of these different types of maneuvers to try to forego and get around it.
I want to say somebody had corrected me. I forgot about Ronnie Musgrove. He was the last Democratic governor that Mississippi had. Fordyce was a Republican. But
Yeah,
so that's
Fordyce was a Republican. Yeah, Ronnie. I mean, you had two. You had Ray Mabus, and you had Ronnie Musgrove.
Yeah, that's my bad. So I ain't mean to, I don't want to. I ain't trying to get nobody. I want nobody to get upset with me, but I kind of got where it comes from. But I remember because Simone, you was talking about when 97 when Jackson elected their first black mayor. I was in school at the time. I was at Jackson when
Harvey
Johnson got elected, and he not only did he get elected he got elected twice.
That's right.
In between that, you had Frank Melton. Oh my God, Frank Melton was something else, man. Frank Melton, we used to ride around with the police, doing them raids with the police. But the thing about it though, and when he passed away, people was ticked off that he was doing that, but they loved the man so much because he cared about the whole city of Jackson, even Harvey Johnson. And then with the elder Lumumba, I think that's when the issues started, to come about. And then of course when his son got into office, it's like basically the whole Republican, the state was like, nigga, you're going to fall in line with it like everybody else.
Well, right after Lumumba, you had the young boy Tony Yarber. Remember
Tony Yarber? Oh yeah,
and Tony Yarber. Yeah, when he got in, and he was actually an embarrassment to us because what he did was he got in and he started paying all his bills because all that stuff came out. They was giving him money under the table and all this stuff, and all of a sudden you write a check for $273,000, where you can have double equity in your home and all that type of stuff. I actually know his family, so I was very, very, and he's a pastor as well. Oh yeah, I know his family. Yeah, he has a church. He has a church right over there off of Northside Drive, going towards President's Hills. And I actually confronted him, but that's a whole other story. But I
did not know that.
Yeah, I know his people, man. See, you got to understand. I was because I was in what's called the 100 Black Men. But anyway, I actually went to that
channel. You dropping some tea?
Yeah. I know him very well, and I know his family.
But it was all out there, though.
Yeah, it was out there. Yeah, it was out there that he had done that, and that wasn't, that was very uncouth of him, and that's how our Chuckway got in. Our Chuckway, excuse me. He got in office, but the only thing is, he came in because the first thing he was talking about was that Siemens contract, because Siemens was, they wanted to leave, and he was trying to block it because he is an attorney. But you're right, he has kind of settled in, but he kind of won my respect back just a little bit because he was going against Tater Tot, which I just don't do undereducated people for certain positions. He graduated from Millsaps and got his bachelor's degree. Then he became the state auditor. But then you went to and I can take it back even more. Ole Miss used to give what's called rankings. They had ranking school, but I think it was straight.
Mr. Walker, you're kind of breaking up.
So I said, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
I'm traveling. I'm sorry. Yeah, but only thing that Tate Reed, when he became the state auditor, he was only 28 years old. He had a bachelor's from Millsap, and then he had, quote unquote, another degree from the Ole Miss School of Banking, which all you had to do was just go 4 Saturdays, and they'll give you a damn certificate. But anyway, it was all political, with him moving up, and I do respect our Chuckway because he did go back and forth, with the guy, over the trash, over the water, and things of that nature. But it's just by design. It began. Who was the guy? It started with what's his name, Haley Barber. Then it went to Phil Bryant. Then from Phil Bryant to Tate Reed. So
Haley Barber must have been the governor when Ronald Mason was the governor, was the president, because he came to our school, and I had to have been a freshman that year. So
Haley Barber, and you had Neely on his staff. Oops, my bad. But
listen, he came to Jackson State, and he was in the College of Business, and I'll never forget it. I had on a green Jackson State sweater. They took I don't know who was clipping pictures. Somebody took a picture of me with Haley Barber, and they printed me out as the to send to all of the people in the state of Mississippi, or I think they probably targeted Black residents. They literally took a picture of me and Haley Barber with my Jackson State University green sweater and plastered me on there for his election. So embarrassing. So embarrassing. I'll never forget it, because somebody was like, hey, you're on this pamphlet.
Right.
You are on this pamphlet.
And see, the thing, what happened was Haley Barber, he was a lawyer, but he didn't really practice law. What he was a very chief lobbyist. So a lot of like I said again, it was all by design. A lot of the companies that Black people were making money in the factories and stuff like that, and the plants, if you will, that were making sizable money in Jackson, all of a sudden they was going overseas, they were leaving the States, they were,
right. And that's what I touched on when we were talking on Tuesday. I was talking about, because they keep on saying, well, these unskilled workers out of high school, like you said, folks was at the factory making good money. This is the rise of the Black middle class, because folks were getting those factory jobs and they were getting paid $25 an hour. Black folks were buying their homes, and that's where the middle class was. That's where the community was. Everybody worked at the factory. Some people worked in the school system. Like, that was something that
because what happened was, because I don't mean to cut you off. What happened was, if you look into and see, they all migrated into the northern part of Jackson. See, let me give you a little history with that. You had the Valley North, you had Norwood, you had Lakeover, which was in the back of in the front of what's called Richwood. You had Woodley, Woodhaven. So Blacks were able to migrate into those areas, because my old high school, Callaway High School, was an all-white high school. But people began to migrate into those areas. And then, of course, they're going to run and all that type of stuff or whatever. Now, you also had like Presidential Hills, you had Ashley Acres, you had the Queens, you had Northwest Hills. See, all these people were homeowners. Because, I would say, if I had to put a number on it, about 35% of those people were working at what's called Packard, because Packard was close to the back of Clinton. And so that their commute wasn't too long. And then in the 70s, you had all these brand new neighborhoods, being built, and they were Black owned. So, there's a lot of things. Like I said, it's all about design. It began with Haley Barbour, and see, a lot of people don't realize. And there's a bunch of white dummies out there. I mean, they'll have one tooth in their mouth, but they'll die voting Republican, and they don't give a damn about them.
That's what I was trying to explain to Mr. Moore and Mr. Haynes about the breakdown, the racial breakdown, and the makeup, the genetic and historical makeup of the state of Mississippi, and why it's not like Georgia, where Georgia saw a huge influx of not only younger people, but of Black people. Like Georgia, the way that it was able to flip and basically almost blue is because of the influx of younger people and the influx of Black people and Democrats.
But here's the
Mississippi,
thing,
all of the people, first of all, in Mississippi, for the most part, folks are leaving Mississippi.
Yeah, the younger people will leave.
Yeah, those people, like, there's a lot of Jackson State alums or people who are from Jackson, Mississippi. The young Black men and women, they leave. They do not, people don't move to Jackson, Mississippi. Like, they'll go to college there, matriculate there, but for the most part, people leave. And that's not just because of race, but it's also upward mobility, getting paid more for whatever it is that you're trying to do, whether it's trying to be a teacher or just all of these things. They will go outside of Mississippi. Secondly, the rural, not even just rural, poor white folks vote Republican.
Oh, yeah, they do.
They have their hospitals are closing down. Their bills are high. Their farming is in the trash. Like, when I say that the poor, impoverished, white, rural voters, they don't care what they don't have. They don't care what they're missing. It doesn't matter how they're affected. They are going to vote Republican. There's no changing it. It doesn't matter what you say. They sit around, watch Fox News, and they believe everything that is on Fox News. They will always vote red. That is just a historical fact. On the flip side, Black voters, and this is not even just in Mississippi, this is actually nationwide. In the United States, Black people overwhelmingly vote Democratic.
Right. Sure. I can say it like this, being from Texas, your political, your Democratic political strongholds are in the 4 major cities in this state. It's Dallas, Fort Worth combined, Austin, Houston, and San Antonio. And then if you really want to go out west, you go to El Paso. They have a big Democratic stronghold because more Hispanics vote Democratic. That's the reason why you saw the rise of Beto O'Rourke during the elections, the primaries at the time.
And so that's why I was trying to explain to them that because it's a disgusting narrative about pulling ourselves up by the bootstraps. I didn't get a chance to clip the Dr. Martin Luther King. He was being interviewed, and he said, "You guys want us to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, but you've given us no boots to pull up from." So basically what I'm saying is that historically, and especially in this climate, like, do you see what's going on in this climate? The Republicans and the white voters are going to very much so vote against their interests. So hospitals are being shut down daily. There's just another hospital that was shut down again because the governor refuses to expand Medicaid. When I say that the chances of, see, the thing with Governor Presley is when you get too aligned with Black voters, which I understand that Black voters want to say vote for Governor Presley, but you're doing Governor Presley a disservice by being publicly acknowledging him and being around him, because if rural voters align Presley with Black people, they're not going to vote him in.
Right. You
So
want to
for me,
him.
I wouldn't even be the type to say in a public platform like on Twitter or taking pictures and stuff, I wouldn't be exposing myself standing as a Black person next to Presley, because in order for Presley to win, he has to have white vote. And white people aren't going to vote for Presley if they think that he's going to help Black people. It doesn't matter that they don't have Medicaid and all the hospitals are closing. And if they have a heart attack, they're more than likely to die because they have to go all the way to Jackson, Mississippi.
Right.
So that's why I said, well, as far as Presley, those conversations need to be had behind closed doors, not in public platforms, not exposing or promoting Black people around Presley, because at the end of the day, anybody like the NAACP or anybody endorsing him that's from a Black organization is going to hurt his chances of being elected. And that's not to downplay the types of movements that they can do behind closed doors, but it's just to highlight the fact that how racially charged Mississippi is.
I say it like this:
about
if let's just say, let's give a scenario. If Presley becomes the next governor of the state of Mississippi, I bet $100 that the Mississippi House and the Senate is going to try everything in their power
To impeach him?
not to impeach him, to get him minimal to no power at all as an elected official. And I'm saying it because you just got to say, like, let's just say he do become governor.
He's going to be a second term Obama, basically.
He's
not going to be able to do any type of legislation, is not getting pushed through. So, which for me, voting in Governor Presley would be a win, aside from the blatant racism that we see with Governor Reeves. I wonder, just based off how I was reading this complaint that was filed and the verbiage that was used in here regarding the blatant taking away of power, it explicitly stated that they're attacking Jackson institutions by underfunding them, and they have Reeves in here. I wonder what type of sanctions would be involved. What type of sanctions could be implemented against Governor Reeves if the lawsuit rules in the favor of the NAACP and the Department of Justice?
See, we have to understand the circuits too. I mean, number one, what circuit is it going to be filed? That's number one. Number two is we already know that probably the state attorney general is going to get involved with that, as far as defense, the same way he did with the Brett Favre situation. So
after they kind of like exposed after they exposed how these folks are acting, which I'm going to read it again. I'm going to read this again because I think it speaks to the brevity of this lawsuit. It says, for example, in recent years, the Mississippi legislature has tried to strip Jackson of local control over its municipal airport, condition disbursement of federal funds to Jackson on oversight by state officials, and denied the funding needed to address Jackson's ongoing water crisis. So this is, of course, where I said Jackson State needs to get on board because we've been denied a bond for our own water system 3 or 4 times. Further, the governor has repeatedly used his line item veto power to cut funding appropriations to Jackson institutions while leaving appropriations for other cities almost entirely untouched. So I wonder what those ramifications are for repeatedly and purposefully taking money away from Jackson and Jackson institutions. I'm thinking when he says funding appropriations to Jackson institutions, I don't want to, like, I could probably look up what line item vetoes he did, but I'm thinking that that is Jackson State University. I'm thinking when they
Yeah,
say,
but see, you gotta understand. At one time, Jackson State was the Big Four. The Big Four is, you have Ole Miss, Mississippi State, USM, and Jackson State. And how Jackson State fell into the Big Four category is because it was a capital city school, and then it was also heavily populated as far as student enrollment. So they didn't have any other choice but to, call it part of the Big Four. And what happened was, one thing about Tate Reeves is that he's trying to dilapidate Jackson so his cronies can come in there. So for the next Republican governor come in, then that's when the gentrification can go ahead and just go settle on in. So it's by design, but we gotta do something about it, because I've been reading up on it and studying, like you said, this Presley guy, and that's saying something. A little town like Nettleton, they hadn't paid taxes in 6 years.
Nettleton, Mississippi.
6 years. Nettleton, Mississippi, they hadn't paid taxes in 6 years. Their taxes have not been raised in 6 years. I mean, they paid taxes, but they have not been raised in 6 years. That's saying something.
Right. And so I was able to find some of these line item vetoes that the governor, and it says the governor may veto parts of any appropriation bill and approve parts of the same, and the portions approved shall be law. So this is one, and this is most recently April of 2023. So these aren't even all of them, but this is one of them. So they're vetoing Section 28, providing $1 million appropriation to the city of Jackson, Mississippi, to pay costs associated with renovations and upgrades for the Jackson Planetarium. $500,000 appropriation to the city of Greenville, Mississippi. Isn't Greenville, Mississippi a majority Black?
Greenville is majority Black. That's when my daughter born when she was born.
Okay, and that was to pay to costs associated with repairs and renovations to Frisbee Park, Maud Bryan Park, and Rounds Park.
Yeah, I know all 3 of those parks there too.
Vetoing $500,000 in appropriations to the Mississippi Department Authority for the purpose of providing funds to Whisper System in Batesville, Mississippi, for research and development to expand its current small unmanned aircraft systems manufacturing capabilities.
That's South Panola right there.
That has a majority Black.
Well, Batesville really not too much majority Black, but
okay.
They got a good concentration of Black people up there in Batesville. Like, I'm gonna put it on with with sports, like, and Uncle said no. South Panola. South Panola was a juggernaut, like I say. I'm gonna say like in football.
Yeah.
They used majority of the team was Black, and guess where they tell those kids to go to?
Ole Miss.
Yep. It's right up the road.
Yeah, it's 38 miles to be exact, from South Panola High School to University of Mississippi. It's 38 miles to be exact. Yep.
So he also vetoed an appropriation for $1 million to the city of Jackson, Mississippi, to pay costs associated with the construction of a parking lot and related facilities at the Jackson Convention Center. So these line item vetoes, those are just the ones that he most recently did. I'm pretty sure I can find where he vetoed some funds for Jackson State.
Oh yeah.
You'll find a lot on that then.
Yeah, you'll find a whole sheet on that. I mean, that goes back to Haley Barber when Neely was on staff, but it goes all the way back to that, even in the mid 90s, because actually, if we look at Jackson history, this was back in 1995 when I was at Tougaloo College. They were working on the water system then, and then all of a sudden, when Haley Barber got in, he started lobbying, quote unquote, lobbying things. So,
and it's crazy when you think about when they said, try to dumb it down and take all the money and allocate it to like Madison and Clinton, to those other cities around Jackson. Not only are you hurting, you're already hurting Jackson State, but you also hurting Tougaloo, which is in North Jackson. You
Bellhaven and
Bellhaven, you hurting Bellhaven, and you hurting Millsap. You even hurting the Mississippi, the UMMC. You're hurting those institutions. So what? For what? So you can try to retake the city.
Right.
That's all it is. Because anytime you can put a damn Weston downtown in front of a post office in the back end, and then there's potholes leading up to it. You got the money. You got the money.
Right.
You got
it. Looks like
it's there.
They also vetoed $250,000 to Briarwood Pool to pay costs associated with facility improvements. And then it says $13.25 million to renovate the LaFleur Bluff golf course and the surrounding area.
I'm gonna tell you what, he ain't gonna veto. He ain't gonna veto no money going up to that penal colony up in Parchment.
Yeah.
I know that he ain't gonna.
It says Jackson makes up for 25%, a quarter of the state of Mississippi's GDP. So we make up 25% of the state of Mississippi's GDP, but you want us to be living in poverty?
They don't care.
Lord have mercy.
And the people that's doing this don't even stay in the city of Jackson.
When I tell you it's a cold world, it's a cold world. Okay, back towards this.
Brother Lee, if you still in the chat, come up for a second. I need to run something across. Brother C. Lee, please, sir.
This is deep. This is deep. We are the ones that make you the most money, and you don't want to make sure we look nice because you don't want us to prosper. Because if we prosper, that means you can't take over Jackson.
Can't take over Jackson.
What they were trying to do is cutting out that little piece, and I could probably think to this day that those places where they're cutting out the space that they're cutting out, the CCID, that particular place is probably the first place to get those renovations with regards to like water and stuff like that, infrastructure, that he would make sure to take care of the white places. It's terrible.
See, if he was, I put it like this. We talk about Greg Abbott here. He's a terrible governor. But if you had put Tate Reeves here in the state of Texas, we will run him out. we will run them out.
Mm-hmm. Because that's terrible. That is terrible. That like people are saying, to spite, you will basically bankrupt, which Mississippi's already at the bottom for everything anyway, with regard to healthcare, with everything. They're at the bottom of the barrel.
And I would say like this: if you would have had, if George W. Bush was the governor of Mississippi, and I'm gonna tell people this: when he was the governor here in the state of Texas, he did a lot to try to do, to try to get those Fortune 500 companies here to the state, and everything. He did have a hand in, and try to improve the state. I bet you he was in the state of Mississippi as they governed, they would try to usurp all that power from him. Because he is not saying that he would turn his back on the rich, but in a sense he would try to help out. He would try to help out black people. See, and that's the difference between. I put it like this: there's a difference between putting somebody in power in that state where they're trying to, even though they are Republican by title, his duty was to the whole state. It wasn't to like a corporation or anything like that.
Right.
But like I said, if you put Haley Barber or Tate Reeves here, boy, we'd have ran his ass out. Because you have to try to convince. You have to go to those Democratic strongholds here in the state to try to convince people to turn, change their vote from Democrat to Republican, and we just not gonna do it.
How you doing, Mr. McGinnis?
Hey, how y'all doing? Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right.
Loud and clear.
Mr. Walker, did you want to ask Mr. McGinnis a question?
Oh yeah. Hey, big bro. How you doing?
Hey, now what's up, man? How you doing, good brother?
Man, it's all right. It's all right. Everything's good. My question is, what do you think about what we're speaking on?
Well, that was inevitable. In fact, when it first went down, okay. So let me slow my roll and go all the way back. Well, I'm glad that Sister SheLovesThee had the head up at the bottom, because that's actually where it goes to. This lawsuit about these two House bills, that was already decided because we're currently in legislation regarding the airport. So you have to understand that. When they tried to take the airport away, let me take it back. Now, try to take it back. They actually passed the law. So it's been passed that the state now has taken over the airport from Jackson. That's what's passed. They have not physically executed it because there's pending legislation. Now, here's the thing, and I need the three of y'all to help me because I always get my cities confused. What's the city where the Carolina Panthers? Which one is the city where the Carolina Panthers sit?
Charlotte.
Okay. Charlotte, I think, is the city that has the exact same lawsuit. I think it was Charlotte that became, close to majority black, and a lot of white people left the city. And then the white people sued to take their airport. And so Charlotte, actually, the black people in Charlotte filed the same lawsuit. And that lawsuit has actually been litigated for 10 years. So when they decided to take ours, Attorney Lamont was very clear, like, okay, but I understand. The white people in Charlotte, they got the money to be in court for 10 years. Y'all don't. So we always understood that the lawsuit was regarding these two current House bills. One, to create judges. Two, to make it easier for them to remove our officials. And then just to throw in third, also their attempt to take over the water structure. That was always the play for us to file lawsuits, because we still have the lawsuit about the airport. So I wanted to be clear. It was actually passed. They had a bill, they voted on it, and technically it's been passed that the state can take over the airport. Because here's what you need to understand. Airport charters are like city charters. the state legislature basically gives you a charter to have a city. They also give you a charter to have an airport. And just like they can give you a charter to have a city, give you a charter to take an airport, they can actually pass legislation to rescind your charter. So it's not really that difficult to do. So they actually passed the legislation to rescind the charter. They just haven't acted on it because we like, see you in court. And so we always knew that this was going to be, in fact, not only was it going to be the same play, this was the only card we had was to go to court about these bills to challenge the constitutionality of them. So this was in the plan. And what was interesting, and I talked about this a little bit on Ken and Zoe's show, what's sad about these hearings and these lawsuits is that they work just like the NBA finals. When I say they work just like the NBA finals, depending on the court, so like, in the NBA finals, we're going to win 2 at our home. You going to win 2 at your crib, and then we're going back. So we're going to win in the county district court that's majority black. We'll lose at the state Supreme Court because that's appointed by the governor and also the white people vote. And then we'll go to the Supreme. So when it eventually goes to the Supreme Court, it's going to go 1-1. It's going to be just like the NBA playoff. We're going to take 1 at our crib. They're going to take 1 at their crib. And then we're going to go to the Supreme Court and battle out. And so that's the play.
But Mr. McGinnis, don't you agree that because of who added themselves to this lawsuit, that this lawsuit will actually work its way through to Supreme Court faster because Merrick, Garland attached, and then all of these different types of lawyers, because they attach themselves to the lawsuit, that it could possibly be decided quicker than some other types of litigation that have been sitting there for years?
Well, okay, so yes and no. Now, the only reason the airport litigation hadn't done anything because they really don't. They don't have the money for it, and they're not 100% sure that they can win. So that's sometimes one of the reasons it sits, because they're looking at what's happening over in Charlotte. And I hope I got that city right the way that's happening. So that's one of the reasons. But to your point, yes, because the DOJ has actually attached itself to this, it will be expedited in a way that other cases that's winding its way through the courts won't. So yeah, you're correct on that. But it's not. But it'll still be where when it goes through the state, it'll still be where the black courts are, where the black appointed courts are, white appointed courts. And so then when we get to the state Supreme Court, it'll be interesting how the Supreme Court rules on this for a couple of ways in which they ruled before. Especially
since it's a violation of the Mississippi Constitution. That's what's interesting. So if you're a state Supreme Court justice and you are responsible for interpreting the state constitution, and it explicitly states in that constitution that judges are supposed to be elected, then are you going to misinterpret your own constitution for which you have sworn to interpret correctly? Or like, I'm not understanding.
Well, because here's what you have to understand though, is that there's always been a provision that you can elect or appoint special judges for special circumstances. So yes, judges are to be elected. So for instance, and Brother Walker may be familiar with this, and Doc too, there's also places called special, what are they called? Because Brother Trent is one. I actually used to work when I was in college at Jackson State, because I was in the JAG of the Mississippi National Guard. I was a JAG soldier in the Mississippi National Guard. I worked for Dennis Sweet and Hal Dawkins when they had a partnership together. And so I used to actually submit a lot of documents to a special master. That's what it is. And so special masters are, and they're kind of funny how the special masters can be appointed or elected, but there have always been judgeships or judges that could be appointed, particularly in special times when they felt like that was and that's what they're trying to hedge their bets on. That they're saying that, well, because there's so much crime, because there's this, that, and the other, there have been cases where we've been able to appoint. The problem is who does the appointing.
Right.
So that's the issue. So there's always been that you can actually create courts and judges for special circumstances, but it still has to fall under the district. I'm not district. What's the word I want to use? Not district. Yeah, jurisdiction of who can actually do it. And so in this case, they're still outside their jurisdiction of who should be appointing these judges for Jackson.
Right.
Yeah, but if they appoint Carlos Moore, it'll damn sure go through. But the only thing is they're definitely not gonna do that. They'll do Carson Reeves before they do Carlos Moore.
Right.
So
this is the fact. This has always been the plan. In fact, my wife has been actually a part of these work session groups because, again, my wife is a political map maker. One of her jobs is that she does the census data and then she dumps census data. And one of her jobs is she goes around the state finding census data to see if you can develop more electable black districts. That's why we were actually last week, and I'll send you that footage. I'll send it to you, so SheLovesThee, because I think I sent it to Doc. He was on my newsletter, but where we actually testified in front of the Clinton city council board of whatever board of aldermen, because Clinton is 40% black, and there's a possibility that Clinton could get a second electoral district. My wife actually drew the map, presented it to.
And you were talking about that because Mr. McGinnis, when we were going through the complaint, and in the history, it talked about how they tried to, when it was talking about how Mississippi went about trying to disenfranchise voters, it talked about how at one point they were trying to redistrict so that Clinton was included as part of Jackson to dilute some of the vote and bring in some of the white voters.
Yes.
They actually talked about that in the complaint. So it's interesting that now the makeup of Clinton has changed to the point where now there's enough black people for another appointment to be.
Yeah, because right now it's 7, and so Clinton has 1. Like I said, 40%. And the question is, can she? And that's actually what she's working on now. Can she draw another district to get 2 districts now? And this is where the other point is. There's not enough black people in the state of Mississippi right now, just based on just the numbers, that we could actually elect on our own someone running for statewide office. However, our problem is we don't do a good enough job in the pockets where we have strongholds to elect the people where we are. And so that's the actual battle is where we have the strongholds, where we have the numbers to control the vote and the economic infrastructure. And so a lot of people
talking about Jackson though, right? Because when I looked at Jackson and they were saying only 40% of Jackson voted. When I did the numbers, the sheer number of black people in Jackson area.
No, I'm talking about other parts like Clinton, like for instance, Clinton is 40% black, but that black turnout doesn't actually, how do I want to put it? As you know, because we tend to only turn out in force for the presidential election, right? And so if you look at the voting patterns in Clinton, for like city elections and some other elections, we don't turn out as strongly. So it's like even if you draw that additional district, the problem is in other places, but even in Jackson, where we have an overwhelming majority, our turnout is still not such to where we could use that turnout to leverage across the state. So that's just how powerful Jackson is. Jackson is so powerful that even under voting, we scare the heck out of white folk.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to explain to them. Like, even I tried to do 30%. 30% is roughly 36,000, and only 16% of white voters, which is 25,000. Even at 30%, we still overwhelmingly are are enough to overcome those voters. So that's why they try.
And here's the thing: we are locally, right, in the city of Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is if more people in the city of Jackson, more black people in Clinton, in those pockets, if more of those people voted, we would not only impact Jackson elections, we could do a little bit better. We couldn't do statewide, but we could do a little bit better, at least impacting more state representatives and senators across the state in these pockets.
Right.
So yeah, you're correct.
Okay. Another question, because I remember you talking about the airport, and they actually talked about the airport, like you said, in this particular case, they mentioned it. Mm-hmm. So them mentioning the airport in this information, where it says, I'm going to just read it real quickly. In 2016, lawmakers approved SB 2162, which would take authority over Jackson's airport from the Joint Municipal Airport Authority. The bill would abolish the JMAA and replace it with a larger authority made up of state, regional, and city representatives. 4 of the 5 leadership members of the JMAA are Black. They are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council. SB 2162 is currently being challenged in federal court. So the fact that they even utilize these types of facts in the complaint is the deciding upon this. Will that impact that airport decision, or do we have to wait for the airport decision as well?
Yeah, those are going to be 2 different cases. What they're using, so you have the airport case. That's going to work. Is what they're simply doing in this particular case is using the airport case to say, see, here's another example of the Mississippi legislature overstepping its bounds and being racist and denying the constitutional rights of Black people. So whatever happens in this case, now what I can say is if we are successful in this case, it will be strong in helping us to remain successful in here, because with the airport case, we're in pretty good standing because, and what's helping people, and again, I keep hoping that I got the city right in Charlotte. They can't argue in the airport case mismanagement. The city of Jackson Airport regularly makes $900 million a year. Period. So, but that's what happened when white people left the city of Jackson. They forgot 2 things. They left the city of Jackson. Yeah, we're gonna leave. We out. Then they went, dang nabbit, we left the zoo and the airport. And so, and I can tell you with the zoo though, they were actually trying to move the zoo prior to and by 1995. So Johnson gets elected in 97. 1995 is when they knew that they no longer had the votes to elect a white mayor. That's when they started trying to rob the covered bear. And so the Jackson Zoo has been on the table to be moved. And I can't, again, this is good because I can't remember the guy's name, but there's this guy, he's a famous, we all knew him, we grew up with him. He was like the animal guy, not the guy who recently died, but there's another guy, and I want to say Bob Hanna, but I can't think if that's his name or not. Yeah, Bob Hanna, the zoo guy. They actually tried to put Bob Hanna on blast. The white people, they brought him to the city and they took him to all the bad parts of the city and said, based on this, don't you think the city, they should move the zoo? And Bob Hanna said, you need all this great opportunity to take all this extra land and build around the zoo. Y'all be crazy. They quickly turned that interview off.
I know you're talking about that Jack Hanna. Jack
Hanna, there we go. Yeah. They quick. When I say they said they got, he was like,
opportunity.
Yes, he said this is. He said you shouldn't move your zoo. In fact, he cited. I can't remember whether it was the New Orleans Zoo or the Memphis Zoo. That actually was in a worse place than the Jackson Zoo. And with whatever the city was, what they did was they worked together to get federal and state funding to actually do the same thing that Jack Hanna was saying.
Wow.
So the zoo and the airport have always been bones of contention for the racist white people who left the state because, and so the problem is they can't argue mismanagement because again, the zoo makes $900 million a year.
So it also states in the complaint, the mayor of Jackson stated in an interview that infrastructure funding received recently by Jackson was inadequate and came to subject to conditions and oversight by the Mississippi Department of Finance and Administration. On information and belief, no other Mississippi cities were subjected to this level of burdening and second guessing. And it also speaks, we just went over those line item vetoes. It says in 2022, Governor Reeves issued a line item veto to block discretionary spending for Jackson, stating that the city is not one suburban golf course and one planetarium away from thriving. The money would have provided upgrades for a large park in addition to other projects. In total, Governor Reeves' line item vetoed more than $17 million of appropriations for projects in the greater Jackson metropolitan area, compared to less than $2 million worth of line items for projects outside of Jackson.
Yep.
I mean, when I tell you they are laying it out so like there's no denying it. Like the complicit, intentional, blatant disregard for the citizens of Jackson and just, it's so blatantly racist. I guess they said, look, this is probably as blatant as it's going to get.
And it's a crazy thing, though. Like, look at all the state capitals in the South. Like, all these state capitals, the capitals have been, like, coming up, like, flourishing and you know what I'm saying, they making money, they expanding, while the state capital of Mississippi, Jackson, is basically, you know what I'm saying, it's going to reverse.
Right. It also says the Mississippi legislature has declined to fund the existing Hinds County criminal justice system on multiple occasions. So this is key because it goes into that argument. How are you guys going to try to pass a law that would appoint judges and you've purposely underfunded the criminal justice system?
Right.
In the legislature's 2022 session, Mississippi declined to pass legislation that would have used federal COVID-19, it's not even their money, to fund a youth mental health program in Jackson, funded assistance to the Jackson Police Department, funded repairs for local detention centers, and create a new detention center to help manage misdemeanor offenders. In the same session, Mississippi granted $360,000 in funds to assist the Neshoba County criminal justice system. The population of Neshoba County is less than 1/7 that of Hinds County. It is 56.5% white, while Jackson is 79.5% Black. The state also granted $3.25 million to the Capitol Police.
And look at the census. Well, not even the census, but just like the demographics of the state of Mississippi. White citizens of the state of Mississippi is dwindling every year. I don't know how much percentage, but they are dwindling every year, while the Black population has been increasing every decade since 19 Celie, I think 70 or 1980.
Yeah, you're right. We've tapered off a bit. We've tapered, and I'm going to say this, and people get upset. The scary part for me on this is because of people coming to the universities and staying right now, and it's minimal. I want to be clear, it's minimal. Like the other, when we say other, like we Black and white and other, it's minimal. But if you look at it as what's growing, what's getting the more jump in growth is the Asian community. Mm-hmm. And what we have to understand is that, and I try to be as respectful as I can. That's why I've never used the phrase people of color, because the Asian community tends to lean conservative. But
Right.
their numbers, but yeah, you're right that we've tapered off a bit, partly because that's what you mentioned earlier. What happens is my father used to say, he says, I'm sick of Mississippi educating the world. And people say, what do you mean you're sick of Mississippi educating the world? He said, because people get some of the best education from our universities and go live elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And, particularly because, and when you go back to Haley Barbour actually bragged that his goal was to make sure that they bring in low-skilled and unskilled labor jobs so that, and they said, well, why are you bragging? He said, since my job is to bring in as many of those low-skilled, unskilled labor jobs because that's where we keep our people educationally in Mississippi. So keep that. That's their whole plan, is to bring the only jobs they're interested in bringing to Mississippi are jobs that don't compete with the plantations in Mississippi. And so that's what has limited or lately put it down. So you're right, Doc, that over the past 30, 40 years, actually past 50 years, we were growing steadily. But in the last census, we've kind of tapered off. That's why we haven't been able to, even though the white population is slowing,
Mm-hmm.
we haven't been able to overtake them in the way that we should have because, most Black people other than myself are getting out of the state of Mississippi.
Right. It's funny that the governor was laughing and kikiing and making the statement that it's a great day to not be in Jackson. And here it is in this federal complaint. It says Governor Reeves has played a significant role in the state's takeover of functions historically exercised by local officials. Last year, while providing an update on Jackson's water crisis to a crowd in Hattiesburg, he called it a great day to not be in Jackson because he suggested he did not have to direct the city's emergency response and public works efforts. Wow.
I bet you they moved the capital to Hattiesburg. He'll be right there.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah. That next phase of the plan. It was, I will say this, what they really thought going back to 95, 96, they were going to leave the city. Jackson was going to implode and it would be easy to gentrify. So what you have to understand is that some of this speaks to the resiliency of Afro-Jacksonians. That what's really got the white people mad is that we have not made it easy for them to gentrify us. Part of that is because of the success of Jackson State, and Jackson State, as Jackson State goes, the city of Jackson goes, and that's what we need to get other Black people to understand. That if you really talk about supporting Jackson and supporting Black people in the state, you really have to support Jackson State. But because we've held on just enough. See, in other areas, in other states, they have all these things that are listed in this complaint. Other states have not had to do. The other Black people either just gave up or left for whatever reason. Afro-Jacksonians didn't give up, didn't quit, didn't leave. Now we left enough, too many of us left and took our tax base out to other areas, but there were just enough Black people, like myself, who, like my wife and I, we were a long time, I'm originally, my parents lived, my mother lived in Clarksdale, my father lived in Jackson. So I've always spent my life 6 months in Clarksdale, 6 months in Jackson, however you want to add that up. My wife is originally from Moss Point and Laurel, right? We met in Jackson. And so we were determined, so I've been living, permanently. Like I was between Jackson and Clarksdale until I graduated from high school, been living permanently in Jackson since 87, came as a freshman. My wife came around 1991. Even when we were, and I live close enough to Jackson State to where it was faster for me to walk than to drive my car. It was actually easier for me because I live in Washington Edition on Top Avenue. I lived on Top Avenue in Washington Edition, right around Virginia Hill, and I would walk there. And when we wanted to build, we wanted to add on to our house. That's all we wanted to do. And I only share my credit score because I let people know I actually once filed bankruptcy, and I still now got an 800 credit score. So I tell people, just because you're in a bad situation don't mean you have to stay in one. And so I had an 800 credit score, and the bank still wouldn't give me the loan to add on to my house right around the street from Jackson State. That's why we had to end up moving. But we were determined to stay at least in Hinds County. So enough Black people have stayed in Jackson and in Hinds County that's why you have to have these. If you go and look, whether it's New York or Compton or anywhere around the country, they have not had to have these kinds of laws because the Black people in those other areas either gave up or, and I'm not saying that they were bad for giving up, but Jackson has been the one place where they've had the legislators out to gentrify us as opposed to us just giving up and running. And a lot of that isn't due to Jackson State. So when we talk about D.I. Love and the importance of Jackson State, history will show that Jackson State holding strong has been one of the reasons why they have not been able to gentrify the city of Jackson.
And I also think a lot of it is, I've noticed some things that they do when they gentrify, especially for like poor Black, well, like in areas where they're trying to gentrify low income, they will promote low income housing. They'll get federal funding. They'll go buy like an apartment complex, or they'll renovate an apartment complex or build one far out from where they want to gentrify. And then they'll move those people from those locations to those types of things, to those types of low income housing. And Mississippi, just how it's structured, they don't necessarily invest in those types of things like low income housing. And, you know, so they're not moving people around like they can in some of these other cities where they're controlling basically how a person moves. We don't have that type of stuff in Mississippi. So being that you don't have those types of things, they're not able to move large bodies of Black Americans like they do in other areas. I think this also, because I am gonna, in probably like 10, 15 minutes, we'll jump off of here. But I think it's interesting to point out that there's been repeated requests from Black judges, elected officials, and other leaderships in Hinds County to add elected judgeships in the county, which have gone unheeded. In 2001, Commission on the Mississippi Judicial System, created by the legislature, recognized that Hinds County courts receive more case filings than any other districts. In 2018, Hinds County voters elected 4 Black judges, all 4 of the elective judgeships in the 7th Circuit Court District for the first time. There are currently 4 elected Hinds County Circuit Court judges: Judge Wooten, Judge Deborah Gibbs, Judge Winston Kidd, and Judge Faye Peterson. All are Black. In 2020, after the Mississippi legislature enacted a bill allocating more assistant district attorneys and criminal investigators statewide, including in Hinds County and other jurisdictions around the state, Hinds County Court requested 2 newly elected judgeships. Hinds County did not receive any new elected judgeships. Instead, it received 4 special circuit court judges appointed by the Chief Justice.
That's what I was talking about. That's what I was talking about. That there's always been a circumstance where you can appoint judges. The problem is who gets to do the appointing.
Okay. And it says, while the preceding paragraphs address permanent elected judges, state law also provides for the temporary appointment of special circuit judges by the Chief Justice of the Mississippi Supreme Court, subject to the advice and consent of a majority of justices of the Mississippi Supreme Court in the event of an emergency or overcrowded docket. So they're responsible for the overcrowded docket, for lack of funding, and for not allowing 2 other judges. And so then instead of doing what they're supposed to do, they tried to circumvent it and take away that power.
Exactly. That's a perfect reading on it, Sister SheLovesThee. Perfect.
And then it said, between 2006 and 2022, Chief Justices of the Mississippi Supreme Court have appointed or continued the appointments of at least 13 special circuit judges in Hinds County. Of those 13 special judges, 9 were white and 4 were Black. Most recently, Chief Justice Michael Randolph appointed a total of 7 judges to the Hinds County Circuit Court, 4 in 2020 and 4 in 2022, one of whom was the same judge appointed in 2020. Of those 7 judges, 5 were white and 2 were black. 3 of the 4 special judges appointed to the Hinds County Circuit Court in 2002 currently remain on the court. Judge Betty Sanders, who is black, Judge Stephen Simpson, who is white, and Judge Frank Bowler, who is white. On information and belief, no circuit court other than Hinds County has had a temporary judge appointed to it pursuant to emergency or overcrowded docket provision since 2020. Goodness gracious. So, I mean, it's basically this complaint is laying out how they're able to circumvent electing judges because the majority of the citizens are black, and so they're going to elect black judges. They're showing you how they're able to circumvent it, but they're also leaving out that they continually refuse to properly fund the court system. And it says that the new appointed judges serve until December 31st, 2026.
Right.
Wow. It says in any scenario, the composition of the Hinds Circuit Court will be between 50 to 64% appointed judges should HB 1020 go into effect.
Yep. Again, what they're trying to create is legal apartheid where they can usurp the black vote. These 2 of these 3 bills are designed to usurp the black vote. That's the whole plan, is that, again, we tried to strangle y'all out, we tried to deny y'all water, we tried to economically. So now, since we can't do that, what we'll simply do is make sure that you don't have any power in electing the people who serve you.
It looks like we're gonna have to possibly finish the rest of this this complaint because we haven't even gotten into 2343.
What's 2343?
So 2343 was basically making it harder for the ability for people to protest.
Right.
Taking away your freedom of speech. You have to apply with the state. You have to apply with the police. You have to take it and get it signed by multiple different people just to be able to protest or be on state capitol grounds at any point in time. And so we definitely need to hone in on that. So I'm going to stop right here so that we'll have a placeholder, because this next part is going to talk about the Capitol Complex Improvement District and expanding the jurisdiction of the Capitol Police, which I think is important because basically that's usurping the power of the sheriff, correct, Mr. McGinnis?
Right. Well, not only that whole Capitol Complex Improvement District. So the first mayor, Lumumba, was put in a real bad spot because this came around the creation of the convention center, and essentially the state of Mississippi, the state legislature wouldn't allow Jackson to create his own bond initiative because we were creating a bond initiative. That is, they were making it difficult for the city of Jackson to do what all other cities do. We got a problem. Who wants to vote to raise taxes to solve this problem? So it was a bond initiative around the new convention center and creating the Capital Improvement District. And so the state legislature essentially stepped in and said, well, we'll let y'all do this bond issue if you let us appoint who administers those funds. So the Capitol Complex Improvement District grows out of that discussion. It grows out of how we got the convention center, but having to basically sell our souls to get the convention center to get the Capital City Improvement District in a way where the state actually controls. And now it's coming. So what we now have with CCID and the CCIPD is coming back to bite us when the original mayor Lumumba warned us and said, hey, you know, we got this. This is one of the few ways we can do it, but they won't let us have our own bond initiative. And so they're using that. So when you hear them out in on this, So when you hear Tater Tot say, well, y'all were fine with the improvement district to get the convention center, actually we weren't. What we wanted was our own bond issue. But what they put in there was we get to appoint. So his point is that y'all let us appoint people over your improvement district. Why can't we do it for the CCPD? Because we don't want y'all to do that. So that's when you hear Tater Tot say this, it was because they had us between a rock and a hard place from the jump. And now they're just trying to use that to move even further. That's it.
Mr. McGinnis, Doc Holliday, and Mr. Walker, thank you all for joining the panel to impart that wisdom and historical references and for clarifying everything, because once again, we still have a long way to go. This is a great, like you said, it's kind of like a war. We're in the NBA finals right now. So this is definitely a win with the Department of Justice joining. But as you stated, Mr. McGinnis, we still have a long way to go. And if everyone would please like the button, hit subscribe. If you would like, I do have some subscriptions available. You can click at the top. I guess it's pinned to the top of the YouTube chat. You can also subscribe, or excuse me, you can add a membership. And once again, thank everybody for coming on the show. Oh, I forgot to mention tomorrow. Let me go ahead and pull this up. Tomorrow is Jackson State's Day of Giving. It's very important that we all participate. JSU's Giving Day Challenge for tomorrow. Hashtag give to JSU. Make sure that you link up with either your local alumni, or you can make a donation. So tomorrow I will probably during lunchtime do a JSU Day of Giving where I'll just play some band music or something from the Sonic Boom of the South. We can look at videos and just highlight the JSU Day of Giving. Once again, everyone, thank you all for tuning in. And please be on the lookout for part 2 of breaking down the NAACP lawsuit and the Department of Justice. Everyone have a good night, and thank you for tuning in.
Effort.